Welcome back.
Good morning.
Good morning. How are you, Mitch?
I'm doing well. You?
I'm doing all right. Had a good weekend. Did some gardening. Well, the wife did the gardening. I just stood there and watched, pretty much, which is great. I did the laundry though, so that was good. Had a great weekend. It was great.
Good.
Weather was nice.
No, it wasn't.
Yeah, it was all right.
It's cold.
It was fun.
It was cold. It was frigid.
It was like sweatshirt season. It was fun. And
Frosty, cold.
This
way
week's
too
going to
cold.
be amazing.
Gonna be what?
It's going to be great.
50s again?
No, it's going to be in the 70s.
Ridiculous.
It's going to be great. A little windy, a little rainy. It's going to be great. We're going to have a great week.
I want 90, no rain.
90 and no rain. And a beach with some blue ocean that you can see to the bottom here in the Midwest. That's what I want.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a podcast that I was listening to where they were like, it's a bunch of Midwest guys. And they were like, what don't we have in the Midwest that we need, right? And they were like, an ocean. And then they started talking about what state are we going to get rid of to get an ocean? Like, what area should we get rid of? I'm like, let's just not go down that path.
Yeah. I mean, technically Kansas used to be an ocean.
I mean, I don't know. I guess technically a lot of things used to be the ocean. So last week we talked about prevenient grace that comes before. So the grace that God gives us, that's working within our life before we even know who God is or what that's all about. So from a baby on up. And so the idea now is to look at justifying grace, which is the grace that now that you're aware of God and God's presence. Justifying grace is kind of the grace that God gives you that you accept from God, and then go forward in your spiritual journey at that point, right?
It's offered and we accept it.
Yeah,
The opportunity to accept what is offered, and probably the hard part for us to come to terms with is it's freely offered to all of us.
Yes. You just have to accept it.
And maybe accepting it is the fact that we have to accept is that God counts us worthy of offering it. That's probably the hard part we have trouble accepting.
Yeah, I think that's where I stand in life, right? Like
either we accept it, we believe it, we understand that we cannot earn it, we don't deserve it, yet it's offered to us, which is where we'd all like to be. But either our pride gets in the way and says, we're doing pretty good on our own. We don't need,
life is doing great.
We don't need it.
We don't need it.
Or we're filthy, rotten, wretched souls that no one could ever actually love enough to offer that to. So we shamefully deny that it's availed to us.
I think also in that, I think there's that initial like, oh, I'm a terrible human being. God could never love me. He could never give me this kind of freeing grace, right? But then I think there's the type that also is where you believe you accept the grace and then you screw up, right? And then you're like, well,
unredeemable.
Right. I was redeemed and then I messed up again.
So we fall in in
that cyclical cycle.
We fall in a cycle of understanding or thinking we understand total depravity.
Yeah.
And understanding grace offered to us, and justifying, and then we accept it.
And then we turn around and mess up.
And then we think, because we've accepted that it's removed total depravity when it hasn't.
Right.
It still remains.
Right. It still remains inside of you. Yeah, I think that's where I sit in a lot of cycles, right? I sit in that cycle of because I think you can do the opposite too, which was kind of your point earlier, which is you can get in the cycle um, oh, I accept it. So now I've got all this justifying grace. I'm good, right? Like, and then you can go back to sin, but because you feel like you've accepted this grace, you feel like you're not sinning, right? You know what I mean? Like, there's this really
Sinvincible.
you sin invincible,
Ooh,
yeah.
we just
you know what I
we
mean?
just made a new term.
You just hits you and bounces right off of you, right? And so I think that's the two cycles that you end up. Now, I think my argument is most people, I think people like to point to the people that are sinful and prideful, but think that they're above it because they've accepted this grace.
Yep.
I think they like to point to those people as like, see, look at those people. But I think
The
hypocrites,
I'm not a believer. I don't follow along. I think your whole Christianity thing's bunk because of
this
the
person.
hypocrisy
Right.
of.
You claim to believe in Jesus.
All right.
Okay. But I think that the vast majority of Christians are actually the same as me, which is you accept the grace, you sin again because the grace doesn't prevent you from sinning, right? Like it's not a shield against it, right? And so you're like, oh gosh, screwed up. You know what I mean? And then you get and then maybe you come back to okay, like I'm sorry. Let me take and then you down again.
And the analogy I've always used is, and you'll love this analogy because you're a roller skater.
Oh, I love.
I'm not a roller skater. It's very complicated for
Yes.
me, but it's roller skating uphill. Is your faith journey? It's your
you put a lot of effort,
yeah,
and then you
but if
pause
you
for a
stop-
second,
yeah.
and you slide back downhill.
If you stop working at it, you stop.
yeah,
You stop. You can using locomotion to move you forward.
yep,
You're gonna roll backwards.
yeah,
And I think we have to try to avoid also one of the sinful thoughts that creep in that it's futile, right? Like succumbing to the rolling backwards as how it is, how it's going to be.
always.
Nothing.
So you just hang out at the bottom of the hill. Mm-hmm. Because you look back up, you're like, think of all the effort I put into getting halfway up this hill, and I can't put that much effort into going all the way up the hill, right? Which nobody will ever.
Yeah,
make.
it's what's a depressing one?
That's depressing.
It's not how I meant it, but the joy is in the skating, not the summiting.
Yeah. And I was listening to another podcast, I don't know, a week
Which is
ago.
a hard analogy for me. I don't enjoy skating at all.
Yes, you'd hang out at the bottom of the hill. You take those skates off,
take
just
the
walk
skates
this,
off
walk
and
up the
walk
hill. I was listening to this other podcast that was talking about kind of a similar message of this thought process of accepting this justifying grace, right, and sinning, and then God saying, okay, hey, we can work with this, right? Like, I still love you. We can work with this. Take my grace again. And then you sin, and then he's like, all right, we can work with this, right? You know what I mean? And that's so an infinite amount of times, right? And that's so contrary to the world, right? You get a job, you mess up, okay, hey, we can work with this. You mess up again, hey, buddy, we can work with this, but I need you to not do that again. You mess up a third time, sorry, and so a lot of us are in that kind of that standard of what the world puts on you as you needing to be almost perfect all the time, and in whether you're at school and you're getting grades, right? You're getting graded, whether you're at work and you're getting reviewed and evaluated for a promotion or not, or whatever, and that nobody in this world will just continue to accept you after all of your flaws over and over and over and over again, right? Like you have a friend who doesn't ever take an invite to come to a party or something.
Yeah.
How many times you keep inviting him before you're just like, he's just not going to come?
7 times 77.
7 times 77. Yeah. So anyway, so I think that it's a hard concept for a lot of people to grasp onto, and that's exactly why I think most people live in that stage of thinking less of themselves, less worthy of the grace than more worthy of the grace, right? Because the world tells you you're not good. You're not good enough. You're not good enough. You're not good enough. Rarely does the world tell you you're great. You're great. You're great. You know what I mean? So that's why I think we all live in that most of us live in that kind of bottom section.
Yeah. I would agree.
So, I have an interesting question for you. You're kind of talking about how sometimes the pride gets in our way of kind of recognizing God's grace. You know, when times are going good, you know, you think it's all you and you're just rocking it out, and you don't really need God or His grace, right? You know, you ever have one of those times you can think of in your life where you just were maybe the pride or the self-centeredness really prevented you from advancing in your spiritual journey, where you just got stuck in that path?
I think some of the areas that we can slow down in is when we get into comparison, which is a lot of what we're talking about with the world of how the world views and counts people worthy, and we get into these comparison traps, and you know, sometimes I think that comparison trap too can make you feel okay about where you are on your journey.
Oh, okay.
Whereas
you kind of looking around and you're like, well, you know, I feel like I'm maybe a little bit
I'm doing okay.
I'm doing compared to everybody else. I'm doing kind of okay with this whole spiritual journey. I think I'm good. And then
even though you may not be feeling like you're crushing it, you can get complacent.
Yeah. Yeah. I think this is common. I don't think this is like an abnormal situation, but I think about myself in my mid 20s to late 20s, right? Like get out of college, you get the job, you get the promotion, you get the promotion, you get the promotion, you get the promotion, and you're kind of just doing really good in life, and you're really trying to, like, you're an adult for the first time, right? And so your whole life growing up, your parents are like, someday you're going to be an adult, you're going to have to make your own decisions, and, you know, blah, 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 blah. The outcome of your life is dependent on your decisions, right? And then you start making some good decisions in life. You get a job, you get a promotion, maybe you get a girlfriend, maybe you get married, maybe you buy a house, right? You get a dog, taking care of the dog. And then all of a sudden you kind of stop and look around and say, wow, look what I did for myself. Right? And because you've been told your whole life your decisions impact your future, and then you kind of look around and you're like, wow, my decisions were pretty good in life, right? And you don't recognize the guidance that God has pushed you in this direction or pushed you in that direction, and you start kind of internalizing that. And then
all the people along the way, like every good, faithful person that has a positive impact on your life has been they live in a way that has shown you how to live, and then you see it, and some of it's through osmosis, and some of it's, you know, from just being around them. Some of it's
diffusion.
Right, and it's just sometimes we can, in our self-centered arrogance, think we've come up with some of these things on our own, whereas we haven't.
Yeah, you had people modeling the behavior for you, right? Yeah, and I think that's kind of, you know, it really took me having children to kind of rebalance that perspective a little bit for me, right? Like, you know, when you are just in charge of yourself, you're kind of like, oh man, I'm making great decisions, but then all of a sudden you're in charge of this little being, right? And then you start really reflecting, for me at least, started reflecting on how I got there and how I can make a difference in my children's lives. And, I think that's really where I started to grow personally, is because I went away from that kind of self-centered nature of my decisions were impacting my life. And then I'm like, well, my decisions now impact another's life. And you kind of put yourself in a way different mental perspective, right? And so I think that's probably not uncommon for for most people in that time frame, right? Yeah. No.
No. Yeah, I was thinking about the acceptance of that notion of justifying grace. In some of our analogies, talking about it being kind of the beginning of the journey.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a destination.
Right.
Showing up to a realization that we're not perfect, we can't be perfect, yet we're loved as if we were perfect, isn't the finish line.
Yeah.
Living that out, extending that to others, living into someone who can live as though living as a person who has the ability to live as someone who understands that is closer to the destination. But
yeah, I look at not to use the sports analogy, but literally prevenient grace is like practicing for a baseball game, a football game. You're running a marathon, right? Practicing for the marathon, and justifying grace is actually like stepping up to the starting line for the marathon, right? Like you're accepting the task ahead of you, right? Like you're accepting that grace, and you're like, okay, this is my journey now, right? Before I was kind of, God was working in my life and I hadn't really accepted the task, but now I'm at that starting line with the number on and I'm ready to go run this 5K, right? Which I would never do. I would never run a 5K.
Never?
I guess never say never, but running's not my jam.
No.
That's like roller skating uphill for you.
Yeah. But running's the same way for me.
Oh, is it?
Oh, yeah.
But not all physical activity is like that for you. I'm just going to point that out.
No.
You love baseball.
Yeah.
So you got to run in baseball.
If you said, hey, Mitch, go run a 5K or hit your knees with this ball peen hammer, I'd sit there and question. I'd have to make a good decision as to which one,
I would argue running a 5K is the same
I know,
result.
That's what I'm saying. Results are going to be the same. It's going to take less time. Give me the hammer. I don't know.
Yeah. I think the and kind of your point earlier a little bit is that the accepting of this justifying grace, I think, happens differently for people too, right? Like, it's not necessarily just an exact moment in your life that you can point to and be like, that was the time that I realized God was working in my life and I accepted his grace to continue working in my life, right? A lot of people come to that decision or that kind of understanding over a period of years, decades, maybe, right? And I think that's also can be frustrating for some people, right? Like that you can't just, at least there's some people that have and can, but that you can't just point to like, this is when I started believing.
Yeah. You don't have that Damascus Road conversion, right?
Right. And those stories though are awe-inspiring, right? Like the stories of the people that like have a definitive moment where, they felt something, they heard something, they saw something, whatever, and it just changed their whole perspective in life, are absolutely awe-inspiring. But that doesn't happen to the vast majority of people.
Yeah, you also have to I also have to have gratitude for maybe my slow exposure to the light. Though not blinding, instantaneous blinding conversion time also means I didn't spend much time in total utter darkness.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think there's just as much light, air quotes, like just as much grace in all those experiences. Just sometimes it's all at once.
Yeah. It's my wife's favorite thing to do in the morning. She gets up about 5:45 and kind of acclimates to waking up, right? The alarms, so she'll hit the alarm and then she kind of lay there for another minute. I'm just trying to like act, get used to it or whatever. And then at some point in the morning, she decides it's time for Penny to wake up, my oldest. And of course, in the summertime, it'll be light out by then. But in the wintertime, it's pitch black, right? Until like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. And so her favorite thing to do is go in the room, flip on the light, right? Open the door, flip on the light, right? And then Penny, she's like, this bright, intense moment, right? And that's kind of your comparison, right? Is like we all like to be woken up with the little gentle summer breeze, the sun gently coming up. We kind of realize, oh, hey, it's getting to be morning time, that kind of thing.
Yeah. But hey, when you're shocked awake like that, everything is more crisp and clean and vibrant in the moment because you were shocked awake. So
anyway, I thought that was a good.
The progressions are always the same. I mean, the amount of light that we're welcomed into is always of the same magnitude. It's just how we end up there.
Yeah, and I do want to. You kind of made a point that I want to emphasize too earlier, which is once you're on this path, once you're on this journey, I think a fatal mistake that people make is that they believe that it's a journey for them and God alone to do. And to your point earlier, the people around you, the community around you, impact you immensely, right? And so I don't think you can make a spiritual journey without a form of community, right?
No.
Without the people around you.
You can only make it so far.
You. Right.
It's not a solo sport. It's a team sport.
It's a team sport. And so I think that that's also a very, although talking about your acceptance of God's grace is very personal, the journey beyond that is very community oriented, right? Because not only are you going to be impacted by people around you, but you will then also impact people around you.
Oh, some of my greatest advancements have been quote unquote leading, right? Yeah. Within some sort of group environment that I'm outside of my comfort zone and ill prepared and end up learning or growing out of a situation where maybe on the surface it looked like I'm supposed to be teaching or leading.
Yeah.
Right? Like, oh yeah, I've got half a dozen 6th grade youth kids in this room when it's total chaos and we're getting a conversation, and then all of a sudden you're like, whoa, I'd never thought of it that way. Thank you for framing it up like that, 6th grader. And and those are, but without that community and pushing yourself into or out of your comfort zone and into other faith community circles, small groups, study groups.
Yeah. Community service projects.
Those opportunities, you miss out. You're only cheating yourself out of growth opportunities.
I would agree. So, should we call somebody?
Yeah, let's make a call.
Who are we gonna call?
Let's call AJ.
Okay.
We haven't talked to AJ in a while.
Hello.
Hey,
AJ.
welcome to Layman's Term.
Hey, what's up?
How
You
you doing
free?
today?
Got a few minutes?
Of course.
We're talking about grace.
Mm,
More
it's a good one.
specifically, we're talking about justifying grace.
Okay.
So we've been talking about last week. We talked about prevenient grace, right? The grace that comes before you recognize that God's working in your life, right? And justifying grace
Uh-huh.
is the grace that God gives you once you've realized God's working in your life, and that that grace that He then offers that you take and start your spiritual journey.
So our question for you, it's a twofold because we feel like all of us are on some sort of sliding scale into this believing, this point that our righteousness is credited, or righteousness is credited to those who believe, who've taken on belief in the grace that's extended to us. And if the call just dropped, that's terrible. We've never had that.
So I don't know what to do.
I don't know what to do.
I guess call him back.
You want to call him back?
Yeah, maybe he got into a bad tunnel or something.
Maybe.
I will also say our church has terrible internet or terrible reception for cell phones.
It has wonderful internet.
The internet is great.
Hello.
Are you there? Are you safe?
Sorry.
Are you in? Did you go through a tunnel?
I'm in a back road that I don't get very good service on, so I'm gonna get to the top of the hill here.
All right. Well, hey, what I was, and we'll spare the listeners but here's the quick summation. We're talking about we've received this this righteous. We're made right with God through our acceptance, our belief in the fact that the grace that He offers can, in fact, be offered to us. And some of the things that prevent us, we toggle back and forth, us being, humans, right, is the fact that either we don't believe that it could actually be offered to someone so wretched as me, or we shift to the other polarity of I'm doing so good, you should offer that grace to somebody else. They definitely need it because I've got it going on.
Yeah.
So, any stories, any life experience, any comment on that bobbing back and forth, pinballing, if you will, capitulating between the two?
Oh, absolutely. First off, grace. It's pretty amazing. It's so amazing they wrote a song about it.
Agreed.
Agreed.
I tend to fall towards the too good to be true category.
Mm-hmm.
I still feel like I have to earn it.
Yep.
Quite frequently. And that's everything from how blessed I am as a person who's surrounded by a great wife and great kids to somebody who's surrounded by great friends, healthy family. I always wonder, when's that ball going to crash?
Yeah.
When's stuff going to come crashing down? Because it's too good to be true. For me, the biggest eye-opener I had with grace was in my early 20s. I was not a great person. I was making some bad decisions, and whenever things got really tough, I didn't do what I should have done, and it cost me a relationship with a girl, and it cost me a relationship with friends. And So for a long time, I thought maybe I didn't deserve that. But looking back with hindsight, they say hindsight's 2020, but now I think I understand that like God's plan for me, that was my mistakes were the best things that happened to me, because I wouldn't be where I'm at today if it wasn't for those mistakes and those poor decisions that I made.
And those poor decisions also avail you the opportunity to better appreciate. It increases the your bandwidth for gratitude.
Yeah, you realize that you're not going to make the same mistakes again. You don't want to mess something up.
Well, I think it also gives you the ability to understand other people, right? And gives you the ability to have some grace towards other people that may have been or may be in a similar situation as you were then, right? You can kind of look at it and say,
Right.
man, I've been there, right?
Yeah.
And that gives you a lot of great perspective to then help other people through similar circumstances.
Absolutely. And I think it's cool that whenever you do that, you look back and maybe I went through all that stuff just to help one person, or maybe I went through all that stuff just to prepare me to be ready for what God has prepared for me. But through all that learning, for a long time, I thought I no longer deserve the things that I was hopeful for and the things that I prayed for. But now I understand his grace, because now I have those things 10 times better than what I probably would have had, because of his grace and because of his plan for me being laid out so perfectly.
Because you came to grips with you didn't earn it, you didn't deserve it, but you have it.
Correct.
Yeah,
because he never gave up on me.
Yep. Yeah, we were talking about earlier. I was listening to another podcast, and they kind of described it as like God saying, "Okay, we can work with that." Okay, I can work with that. And then you kind of do something else, and hey, it's okay, we can work with that, right?
Right.
And I think that's exactly that. He helps you learn from those situations and mold you from those situations of where you mess up, and then you're repentant of that, and it helps mold you and shape you into the person that you ought to be.
Yeah, absolutely. That's been my experience 100%.
Yeah. So we also kind of talked about a little bit as this kind of time where you kind of realize God's working in your life, and you accept this justifying grace as like the beginning of your spiritual journey, not the end, right? So,
Right.
you had a lot of. I had a bad analogy because it's sports related, but you're preparing for like a 5K, right? That's prevenient grace, and then you step up to the starting line, you put your number on, and they say go, and that's your kind of acceptance of justifying grace. And it's not saying that your race is perfect. You're going to not stumble, fall. You're not going to want to give up. You obviously are. You're going to want to. There's times you're going to be like, I can't do this, right? You need to take a break. You need to get some liquid in you, right? So that idea of that the beginning of your journey, and not necessarily the end of your journey, right?
Yeah.
So how do you feel about, like, now that you're on this journey, what are some of the influences that you've had in your life that have really helped you grow in your spiritual journey?
Well, I am not a runner. by any
Neither are
means.
we.
I think
Yeah, either way. This is not a running podcast.
but I'm gonna put it in a way that I think relates to, I guess, me and maybe some other folks too. And that's it with music and being a musician.
Also something I'm not.
Yeah, also something I'm not
I love
capable
it.
of doing.
Roll the musical analogies.
So, as a musician, you start to learn your instrument, and you start to learn how to play your instrument. And while you may not be great at it, you stumble through the practicing, and you stumble through the growing pains. You want to give up because it's hard, and then you start becoming better and getting confident enough to start playing music with other musicians. So then once you start playing with other musicians, you realize that maybe you could be even better than what you were. So the benchmark moves. As you surround yourself with other musicians and you get better, you crave to be a better musician, and that puts you around musicians who are better than yourself.
This is
So when you
way
surround
better than Keith's
yourself-
running analogy.
Yeah, it's way better.
Keith's running analogy is garbage compared to this. Keep going.
I didn't think it was garbage.
Well,
I just
God extends grace to him, AJ. We don't have to. It's like, keep going.
No,
with
that's
this.
not accurate. Man.
Keep going with this musical analogy. This is amazing.
so as you surround yourself with people who are better musicians than you yourself become better. And then iron sharpens iron. Eventually you get in a position where you realize that there's always going to be somebody that's better than you, and there's somebody who can teach you something that you don't already know. And that's only by listening and practicing that you're going to get there. So church is the same way. You can be a loner and still have a relationship with God and still know him and him know you. But until you surround yourself with people who are more experienced than you, people who have been on similar journeys as you, or people who are going on the same journey that you're going on, that's when you're truly going to reach your potential. A musician can sit in a room and play guitar or play drums or play their instrument by themselves, and that can be fulfilling. But until you do that craft or do that skill set with others and reach your full potential, it's much more rewarding, especially when you start affecting other people, maybe who are not musicians or non-Christians. And that's when you're really gaining some traction and doing what you.
Ladies and gentlemen, you heard it here.
That's why we call people.
That's why we call people. That's why we have people on the phone. That's why that is the beauty and the design of the Layman's Term show.
It's great.
Is we as lay people don't have the right answers, but we know people who can find them.
Yeah.
We just help draw them out. You know, I think we can take a little bit of credit for that. We called AJ. We persevered. We called him back after the call dropped, and then boom. I'm going to encourage everybody out there in podcast world to just run with that musical analogy. Even if you're not a musician, you can follow along. And
you can run a 5K with a musical analogy.
That's right.
Yeah.
And you know. Hey,
I think you can compare that to a lot of things, though, not just musicians. I think cooking's that way too, right?
Absolutely.
Cooking's absolutely that way. You can only get so good without any kind of external influences. Watching a cooking show or getting next to something. I mean, even professional chefs will travel to other people's restaurants and spend months with them, learning their techniques to become a better cook, right? So
Yeah.
I think you can extend that example to many other things. That's great, AJ.
Love it. Anyway, that's a mic drop. Thank you for joining us, AJ. We'll talk to you later. All the kind listeners and watchers out there, you guys have a blessed week. We love you, and we'll see you next time.
Later.